It's elemental. Clash of personalities. Which element are you? Written by Rocco. Audiobook edition. For everyone who has ever left a conversation and immediately needed to lie down. It was elemental. Introduction. Every difficult relationship is, at its core, a clash of personalities. This book was not written to help you judge people. It was written because most of us walk through our lives perpetually drained, quietly baffled by why certain people light us up while others hollow us out. And we've never had a clean explanation for it. We blame ourselves. We call ourselves introverts, or hypersensitive, or bad at people. We decide we're the problem. You are not the problem. People affect your energy. That is a real, measurable, undeniable thing. And different people do it in different ways. The friend who fills a room with electricity also fills it with noise. The colleague who never misses a deadline also never misses an opportunity to make you feel like you're running behind. The partner who seems bottomless in their calm also seems bottomless in their resistance to any change at all. None of these people are bad. They're just an element. This book will show you the 4 elements: fire, earth, wind, and water. Not as a way to dismiss people, but as a way to understand what's actually happening in your most difficult relationships. Once you can name it, you can work with it. Once you can work with it, you stop losing so much of yourself trying to manage something you couldn't even see. A few things worth knowing before we begin. First, these elements describe behavior patterns, not souls. People are more than their element, and a person's element can shift in different contexts. Someone who is earth at home may be wind at work. Second, every element has a shadow side and a gift side. The most exhausting version of any element is what you get when they're under stress, out of self-awareness, or simply in the wrong environment. The best version is what you get when they're healthy, seen, and secure. Third, and this one matters, you are also an element. Maybe 2. And somewhere in this book, you will hear something about yourself that stings a little. That's the part worth staying with. Let's begin. Part 1. Why you're so tired. Chapter 1. Why some people leave you tired. Think about the last time you felt genuinely, inexplicably drained. Not tired because you ran a marathon or worked a double shift. Tired in that particular way that happens after spending time with another human being. A specific kind of hollow fatigue that sits somewhere between your chest and the back of your eyes. You drove home in silence. You needed to just sit. You might have wondered, briefly, what was wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Social energy depletion is one of the least discussed and most widely experienced phenomena in modern life. We talk endlessly about burnout from work, but almost never about burnout from people. Even though, in most cases, the two are inseparable. The open plan office doesn't drain you because of the fluorescent lights. It drains you because of Kevin in accounting who stops by your desk every 40 minutes, or the team lead whose feedback sessions leave you feeling like you failed a test you didn't know you were taking. The open plan office doesn't drain you because of the fluorescent lights. The science here is real. Human social interaction requires cognitive and emotional processing. We are constantly, and mostly unconsciously, reading the people around us. Their tone, their body language, their subtext, their needs, their moods. Some of this processing is easy. We do it automatically, like breathing. But some interactions demand a disproportionate amount of that processing power. And when we run low, we experience it as exhaustion. What determines how much processing a person requires? This is where it gets interesting. It's not about introversion. The standard cultural explanation for social fatigue is introversion. If you get tired around people, you're an introvert. If you get energized, you're an extrovert. Most people have heard this model, and many find it useful as far as it goes. But it doesn't go far enough. Because here's what the introvert and extrovert model can't explain. Why do you find some people energizing and others depleting, regardless of how many of them there are? Why does 1 hour with your best friend feel like nothing, while 30 minutes with your mother-in-law feels like a week at high altitude? Why do some meetings leave you buzzing and others leave you staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning? The answer isn't about how many people are present. It's about which kind of person they are. Certain personality structures, certain patterns of behavior, communication, emotional expression, and relational need demand specific types of processing from the people around them. They are not doing this on purpose. Most of the time, they have no idea they're doing it at all. They are simply being who they are. But who they are requires something particular from you. The energy exchange. Every relationship involves an exchange of energy. Some exchanges are reciprocal. You give, you receive, you leave replenished. Others are net negative. You give more than you receive, and over time, the deficit accumulates. This doesn't mean a net negative relationship is a bad one. Some of the most important relationships of our lives, parenting, caregiving, mentorship, involve sustained giving. The difference between those and the relationships that truly drain us is meaning. When we know why we're giving, and we believe the giving matters, we find reserves we didn't know we had. When we don't understand why a person costs us so much, when we can't explain it, can't name it, can't see it clearly, the cost feels arbitrary and therefore unjust. The elements in this book don't exist to help you avoid giving. They exist to help you understand what kind of giving each person requires, and to help you decide whether you have it to give. And when? Why now? In an earlier era, this question mattered less. People had smaller social circles, deeper local roots, less constant contact with a wider world. Today, you might interact with dozens of different personality types in a single day. The group chat that never stops, the open office, the social media algorithms surfacing an ex-colleague's take on something you didn't ask about. The relational demand of modern life is genuinely unprecedented. Learning to navigate different energy types isn't a luxury. It's a survival skill. This book gives you a framework. For elements, cleanly drawn, easy to remember, and honest about both the gifts and the costs of each. The goal is not to sort people into boxes and dismiss them. The goal is to see them. Really see them so that you can engage with them more wisely, set limits more clearly, and stop wasting energy being confused about what's happening. Here are the 4 elements. Part 2. The 4 elements. Chapter 2. Fire. You light up every room you enter. You also never leave. You know a fire. You probably know several. They are the person who shows up to a party and immediately changes the temperature of the room. They make fast friends with strangers. They have 3 stories ready at all times, each one funnier than the last, and they tell them with a physical commitment that turns any table into a stage. They send long, chaotic, brilliantly entertaining voice messages. They have plans, so many plans, and they invite you to all of them, often at the last minute, and they're genuinely hurt if you say no. Fire types are magnetic. There is no other word for it. They generate a specific kind of warmth, and being inside their orbit feels like standing near a fire on a cold night. It feels good. It feels alive. It reminds you that the world is full of possibility and that you, specifically, are someone worth paying attention to, because the fire is paying attention to you. And when a fire looks at you, you feel seen. This is the gift. Here is the cost. The exhaustion pattern. The same quality that makes fire types magnetic makes them relentless. The fire that warms you can also burn through your reserves, because fire types don't regulate their energy output. They broadcast it continuously, and they expect the same broadcast in return. Time with a fire is rarely quiet. It is full. Full of conversation, full of ideas, full of plans, full of emotional highs and lows, full of them. Fire types are intense in their enthusiasm and intense in their need for engagement. They are almost never bored, but they are frequently disappointed when others don't match their level of engagement, and that disappointment, subtle, unspoken, or loudly expressed depending on the fire, is one of the primary draining mechanisms of the element. The secondary drain is the asymmetry. Fire types are not, as a rule, good listeners. They are good conversationalists, which is a different thing. They can hold a conversation for hours, but the conversation tends to orbit them. If you track the airtime in any interaction with a fire, you will find the ratio is rarely equal. This is not malice. Fire types are not self-absorbed in the defensive sense. They are simply so full of inner activity, so many thoughts, feelings, stories, and reactions, that they genuinely can't find the pause long enough for you to get the same amount out. The tertiary drain is their inconsistency. Fire types change their minds. They commit and then uncommit. They ignite projects and abandon them. They make plans and then, with genuine remorse, cancel them when something shinier appears. This unreliability costs the people around them a specific kind of energy. The energy of never quite being able to rely on them, of always holding a fire's promise with one hand and a backup plan with the other. The shadow side. An unaware fire is one of the most exhausting people you will ever meet. Under stress, fire types amplify. They become louder, more impulsive, more emotionally volatile. They catastrophize and then recover, often in the same breath. They seek validation constantly and experience any withdrawal of attention as abandonment. They can become manipulative without meaning to, spinning narratives, creating drama, or manufacturing crises to pull people back into orbit. They are not doing this cynically. They are doing it because at a deep level, fire types are terrified of being invisible, and drama is the fastest way to become visible again. A fire in full shadow is a crisis generator. Everything becomes urgent. Everyone is needed. The phone doesn't stop. The emotional pitch stays at 11. The gift, reconsidered. Here is what the fire brings that no other element can fully replicate: aliveness. Fire types are the people who convince you to take the trip, try the thing, start the project, make the call. They see possibility in places you've stopped looking. They are constitutionally unable to accept that life should be dull, and when they are at their best, they are contagious. Their enthusiasm is not performance. It is how they genuinely experience the world. They live on the forward edge of their own experience, and they are extraordinarily good at pulling others forward with them. The fire in your life is probably the reason for at least one thing you're genuinely glad you did. How to recognize them. Fast talker. Big gestures. Eye contact that feels almost too direct. Laugh first, think second. Texts in long streams, then disappears for days. Cancels, but always with a story. Makes you feel like the most interesting person they've ever met. And then you see them do it to someone else and wonder if it was real. It was real. They just do it for everyone. What fire needs, but rarely asks for. Genuine attention. Not performance of attention. Real interest in what they're actually saying, which is usually a distress signal wrapped in entertainment. Fire types perform their feelings before they feel them. And what they most need is someone who can see through the performance to the actual feeling underneath. They also need permission to disappoint people, which most fire types haven't been given and have therefore built elaborate avoidance systems around. How to manage your energy with fire. Set time limits before you go in. 2 hours at a party, not the whole night. Coffee, not dinner. A phone call with a hard stop. Fire types will push against these limits, but they respect people who hold them, often more than the people who give them unlimited access. Do not try to outtalk a fire. You will not win, and the competition itself will exhaust you. Instead, learn the art of the deliberate redirect. A specific, genuine question that shifts their attention without creating competition for airtime. Give yourself a recovery window after significant time with a fire. Not because anything went wrong, but because you need to discharge the extra charge. 10 minutes of quiet, a walk alone. Anything that lets your nervous system return to baseline. Chapter 3. Earth. They've been your person for 20 years. They've had the same opinion for 20 years. Earth types are the bedrock people. They are the friend who picks up the phone at midnight without complaint. The colleague who is already at their desk when you arrive and still there when you leave. The partner who remembers how you take your coffee and how you get when you're overtired and what you need before you know you need it. The family member who shows up, to the hospital, to the move, to the boring school event no one else attended. Earth types show up. It is perhaps their defining characteristic. There is a specific kind of safety in being around an Earth. You know where you stand. You know what they think. You know they will be there tomorrow in essentially the same form they are today. In a world of uncertainty, Earth types are certainty made human. They are the reason some people survive their worst years. Because there was one person who didn't move, didn't leave, didn't change their mind about who you were. That steadiness is profound. It is also, eventually, the problem. The exhaustion pattern. Earth types exhaust you through resistance. They don't resist in an aggressive way, usually. They resist in a slow, patient, absolute way that can feel, over time, like pushing against a wall that never pushes back, but also never moves. Suggest a new restaurant. They'll go, once, if you insist, but their expression during the meal will communicate clearly that they could have predicted this wouldn't be as good as the usual place. Propose a change in how you do something. They'll engage with the proposal politely, and then continue doing it the old way. Bring new information that complicates something they believe. They'll nod and then continue believing it. Earth types are not stupid. They are not lazy. They simply have a very high bar for change. Their internal operating principle is, if it isn't broken, why risk it? This principle has kept them stable and reliable. It has also made them, in some contexts, impossible to move. The secondary drain is their baseline. Earth types don't do high. They don't do low. They do level. A consistent, even emotional register that can feel either deeply reassuring or mildly suffocating, depending on what you need in a given moment. If you're in crisis, the Earth's levelness is a lifeline. If you're excited about something, the Earth's measured response can feel like a bucket of cold water. They're not dampening your enthusiasm deliberately. They just don't escalate, and their refusal to escalate can read, particularly to fire types or water types, as indifference. The tertiary drain, and this is the subtle one, is the weight of being known by an Earth. Earth types remember everything. They have a version of you that was formed years ago and updated incrementally. This is deeply loving, but it can also be a trap. If you've grown, if you've changed, if you've left behind a version of yourself you no longer want to be, the Earth's faithful maintenance of your history can start to feel like a leash. The shadow side. Under stress, Earth types dig in. Where fire types amplify, Earth types calcify. They become more themselves, more certain of their positions, more resistant to input, more committed to the idea that if everyone would just stop panicking and do things the way they've always been done, things would be fine. They can become passive in a way that reads as punishment. Disengaging without explaining, withdrawing without leaving, making their displeasure known through density rather than confrontation. The Earth in full shadow is immovable and unknowable. They've shut down the interface. You can talk to them, but they've stopped really receiving. They're waiting for the storm to pass. And if you are the storm, that patience is indistinguishable from rejection. At their worst, Earth types can hold relationships hostage to consistency. Their implicit contract is, I have always been there for you. Therefore you owe me your sameness in return. When the people they love change in ways the Earth didn't authorize, they can become quietly, lastingly hurt. And they will bring it up, carefully and factually, for years. The gift, reconsidered. Earth types are the reason anything gets finished. While the fire is igniting 10 new projects, the Earth is completing the one they started 6 months ago. While the wind is demanding a revolution in how the team operates, the Earth is making sure the team still operates at all. While the water is processing the emotional fallout of the last meeting, the Earth has already written the follow-up email. Earth types are the people who build things that last. They are not interested in being impressive. They are interested in being reliable, and in most of the contexts that actually matter. Raising children, building businesses, sustaining communities, reliability is worth more than impressiveness. How to recognize them. Arrives on time, every time. has opinions about the right way to do things that are not up for discussion. Their house, desk, or car is organized in a specific way, and they notice immediately when something is out of place. Slow to trust, but once you're in forever. Doesn't initiate much, but responds consistently. The last one to suggest change and the first one to make it work once change is decided. How to manage your energy with Earth. Don't try to change an Earth in real time. If you need them to do something differently, plant the seed and walk away. Give them time to arrive at the new position on their own terms. The harder you push, the more resistance you'll meet. Be explicit about what you need. Earth types are not natural mind readers in the emotional sense. They're excellent at reading your practical needs, but they often miss emotional ones. If you need them to be enthusiastic, say so directly. If you need them to change something, explain exactly what and why. The abstract request goes nowhere. The specific request with a clear rationale has a real chance. Appreciate the things they do that you never ask for. Earth types feel most known when their consistency is noticed. A small, specific acknowledgement of the thing they always do. Not the grand gesture, the everyday thing. Will do more for your relationship with an Earth than a dozen grand gestures. Chapter 4. Wind. Everything they touch either improves dramatically or gets swept away. Let's be honest about the wind up front. They are the element most likely to change your life, and most likely to cost you something while doing it. You know a wind. You probably have complicated feelings about them. Wind types are the people who get things done that no one else could get done. They set a standard and they hold it, relentlessly, regardless of how uncomfortable that makes everyone around them. They see problems that others have learned to ignore and they cannot not say something about it. They have an internal engine that never fully shuts off. They push. They demand. They expect. Of themselves, first, and then of everyone else. Results around a wind are often remarkable. Teams led by wind types consistently outperform. Projects driven by wind types tend to cross the finish line. Arguments with wind types tend to sharpen your thinking, even when they infuriate you. Wind types make people better. And the people made better by a wind often spend years being grateful for it and years resenting the process. Both things are true simultaneously. The exhaustion pattern. Wind types exhaust you through pressure. It's not always loud pressure. Some winds are quiet, precise and cool, delivering critiques with the emotional temperature of a technical report. Others are volcanic. The raised voice, the barely contained impatience, the comment that lands like a diagnosis. But regardless of volume, all wind types create a specific atmospheric condition. The sense that nothing is ever quite good enough, that the bar is always one notch higher than where you are, that to stop moving is to fail. This is the core drain, the continuous performance demand. Around a wind, you are always aware of being evaluated. This awareness is not always conscious, but it is always active, and the cognitive and emotional cost of sustained self-monitoring is enormous. You don't relax around a wind. You calibrate. The secondary drain is the fallout. Wind types have strong opinions and they deploy them. Some of these opinions are delivered as fact, which removes the possibility of gentle disagreement. You're not arguing with a perspective. You're arguing with what the wind has already decided is reality. The energy required to maintain your own viewpoint in the face of a wind certainty is significant. Many people simply stop trying. They let the wind be right, and they start editing themselves preemptively, and over time they find they've shrunk to the size of the space the wind allows them. The tertiary drain is the intimacy gap. Wind types are excellent at many things, but vulnerability is not typically among them. They move fast, they stay high altitude, and they keep their own softness under strict guard. Getting close to a wind, really close, requires a patience and persistence that most people exhaust before they reach the interior. And the interior, when you reach it, is usually tender and frightened in a way that would surprise everyone who has only seen the exterior. But that interior is earned, not offered. The shadow side. Wind types under stress become storms in the literal sense. Destructive. They become hypercritical, dismissive, and occasionally cruel. Not because they want to wound, but because they are operating at full intensity with the filters turned off. They lose patience with what they perceive as slowness, incompetence, or weakness, and they say so in ways that leave marks. The damage done by a wind in full shadow can last years. People who were once in close relationships with unaware wind types often describe an anxiety response, a physical bracing, that persists long after the relationship ended. Wind types also struggle profoundly with failure. They push so hard in part because the possibility of falling short is intolerable to them. When they do fail, and eventually everyone does, the shadow wind either externalizes it completely, meaning it was everyone else's fault, or implodes with intense, private, and terrifying self-recrimination. There is rarely a middle ground. The gift, reconsidered. Wind types teach you what you're capable of. The boss who pushed you past what you thought you could do. The parent whose impossible standards you spent years angry about and years quietly grateful for. The partner who called out the pattern you'd been in for a decade and refused to let you pretend you didn't see it. These were wind types. They cost you something. They also gave you something you couldn't have gotten comfortably. Wind types hold a standard for the world that nobody else is willing to hold. They are fueled by a vision of how things should be: better, sharper, more honest, more excellent. And their insistence on that vision, even when it's infuriating, is a form of respect. Wind types don't push you because they think you're inadequate. They push you because they believe you could be extraordinary and they can't bear to watch you settle for less. How to recognize them? Direct to the point of bluntness. No preamble, no softening, no, "I just wanted to check in about something." They get to the point. Strong opinions on quality. Arrive prepared. Leave disappointed by meetings that could have been emails. Ask hard questions in public. Give feedback without being asked for it. Move faster than the room. Have a specific look when they think someone is wasting their time. How to manage your energy with wind. Don't soften everything you say. Wind types read excessive softening as either weakness or deception, and both raise their defenses. Speak plainly. They will respect you for it. Protect your self-assessment. A wind's opinion of your performance is one data point, not the verdict. Remind yourself of this regularly, especially after a difficult interaction. Build an internal measure of your own quality that exists independently of the wind's feedback. Find the vulnerability. If you're in a close relationship with a wind and you want it to actually be close, you will need to be the one to go first. To put your softness on the table. To be genuinely open in a way that gives the wind permission to do the same. Most wind types are desperately waiting for this invitation. They just can't issue it themselves. Set limits on criticism. It is completely acceptable to say, directly, "I'm not looking for feedback on this right now. I just want to share it." A wind may bristle. Hold the line anyway. They will adjust. Chapter 5. Water. They will understand you better than you understand yourself. They will also need 3 days to recover from the conversation. Water types are the deepest people you'll ever know. They notice things no one else notices. The shift in your voice before you've even registered you're upset. The subtext in what you said 2 weeks ago that they're still gently turning over. The feeling underneath your feeling. The thing you almost said before you chose something safer. Water types pick up everything. They are tuned, at all times, to the full signal. Not just what you're saying, but everything that surrounds what you're saying. Time with a water is the closest thing to being truly known that most people experience. They listen not just to reply but to understand, and the quality of their understanding can feel almost disorienting. Like suddenly being able to see yourself from outside yourself. People leave conversations with water types having said things they've never said out loud. People write to water types in the middle of the night because the water is the one person who will not only read it, but understand exactly what it means. This is a rare and extraordinary gift. It is also held inside a person who absorbs everything they touch. The exhaustion pattern. Water types exhaust you through spillover. Their sensitivity is not selective. They can't turn off the reception. They take in everything. Your stress, your ambivalence, your unresolved tension with the person across the room, the emotional weather of the entire environment. By the time a water has been in a difficult environment for a few hours, they have accumulated an enormous amount of processed and unprocessed input, and they need to put it somewhere. Often, they put it in you. Not cruelly. Water types are rarely cruel. But a water in processing mode can flood a conversation with emotional content that you weren't necessarily prepared to handle. They process aloud. They go deep. They need you to follow them down. For people who prefer shallower waters, this can feel like being pulled under. For anyone who is already running low on their own resources, a water's processing needs can feel like a demand for a donation from an empty account. The secondary drain is the fragility. Water types bruise easily. A careless comment, a dismissive tone, a day when you're too distracted to really listen. All of these land harder on a water than you'd expect, and their response to being hurt is rarely quick or clean. It's a slow wound. They'll carry it, turn it over, and return to it days later in a conversation that you thought was about something else entirely. The tertiary drain is the echo chamber risk. Water types are extraordinarily good at reflecting your experience back to you, which can be healing or can be a trap. If you are spiraling, in anxiety, in grief, in a bad story about yourself, a water can spiral with you. They don't mean to. They're just good at entering your world, and sometimes your world is a place neither of you should be spending too much time. The shadow side. Water types under stress withdraw or collapse. Where wind types externalize their distress, water types internalize it. They go quiet. They disappear into their own processing. They become unavailable in a way that is hard to read from the outside. Are they angry? Hurt? Fine? Overwhelmed? The water often doesn't know themselves. They are flooded with sensation and meaning and can't yet assemble it into something communicable. In relationships, this can be devastating. The person who understood you most deeply has gone somewhere you can't follow, and they haven't left a forwarding address. The water's withdrawal is not punishment. It is survival, but it can feel indistinguishable from abandonment. At their worst, water types can become entangled in other people's pain to the point of losing their own shape. They take on other people's emotions as their own. They stay too long in bad relationships because leaving feels like abandonment. They say yes when they mean no because disappointing someone is physically painful to them. Over time, an unconscious water can become almost entirely made up of other people's reflections, with very little that is purely, unmistakably their own. The gift, reconsidered. Water types are the people who make you feel like being human is okay. They hold complexity without simplifying it. They sit with you in the hard parts instead of rushing to fix them. They believe that your inner life is worth attending to, not as self-indulgence, but as the most important work there is. In a world that is moving faster than any of us can process, water types are a place to stop. The art a water makes, the writing a water writes, the therapy a water practices, the friendship a water offers. These are things that change people. Not loudly, not efficiently, quietly, thoroughly, lastingly. How to recognize them. Pauses before speaking. Makes you feel heard in a way that's slightly uncanny. Remembers the thing you said in passing 6 months ago. Has strong feelings about things that don't seem important until they explain why they matter. Needs decompression time after social events. Keeps a journal, or should. Apologizes too much. Probably has a therapist, and probably is a good candidate to be one. How to manage your energy with water. Don't flood a water with all your problems at once. They will absorb all of it, and the cost to them is real. Give them your highest priority thing and let them be with that. You'll get more, not less. Give them explicit permission to set limits. Water types are terrible at saying no, partly because they want help and partly because they know their no will land harder on the people around them than anyone else's would. The explicit invitation, "You can tell me if this is too much," is a genuine gift. Don't dismiss what they pick up. When a water says they're sensing something, investigate before you deny. They are often right, and their reads, when integrated rather than dismissed, can save you from a great deal of trouble. Be cautious about using a water as your only place to process. They will hold it, they always hold it, but they pay a real price. Make sure the exchange is reciprocal. Part 3. How they live. Chapter 6. Which element are you under stress? Here is a useful principle. Stress does not change your element. It reveals it. Under pressure, every person moves toward the most exaggerated version of their natural tendencies. The fire, already prone to impulsivity, becomes chaotic. The earth, already resistant to change, becomes immovable. The wind, already demanding, becomes relentless. The water, already absorptive, becomes overwhelmed to the point of shutdown. Understanding how each element behaves under stress is not just useful for understanding the people in your life. It's the fastest way to understand yourself. We all like to think of ourselves at our best, but who we are under pressure is who we actually are, stripped of the effort it takes to be our better selves. Take a moment with each of these before you dismiss them. Fire under stress becomes chaotic and emotionally volatile. Every problem is a 5-alarm emergency. Decision-making, already fast, becomes reckless. They scatter, starting things, abandoning them, starting others. They seek stimulation as a coping mechanism, which often means creating drama where none existed, making impulsive financial decisions, or flooding the people closest to them with emotional intensity that has nowhere useful to go. The fire's stress behavior can look like excitement to outsiders. There's still a lot of energy, still a lot of motion, but it's not productive energy. It's spinning. What a fire needs when stressed. Someone to slow them down without shutting them down. Presence, not solutions. The phrase, "I'm here," matters more to a stressed fire than any advice you could offer. Earth under stress shuts down and digs in. Becomes more conservative, more resistant, more certain that any change will make things worse. May become passive, technically present, but emotionally unavailable. Their communication narrows. The warmth that is usually available recedes behind a wall of procedural normalcy. They continue doing the routines, keeping the commitments, showing up, but they are not reachable. The earth under stress can seem fine from a distance, which is part of the problem. They rarely ask for help. They often don't know they need it. What an earth needs when stressed? To be invited, not pushed. A specific, low-pressure opening. Not what's wrong. But, I noticed you seem like you might need some space, and I also want you to know I'm here if that changes. Give them the option. Don't demand the conversation. Wind under stress becomes relentless and, in some cases, destructive. The internal engine, already running hot, redlines. They push harder, criticize more sharply, tolerate less. The patience that they have, which is usually reserved for the work, evaporates entirely when applied to people. Small failures become unforgivable. Expectations that were already high become impossible. The wind under stress often doesn't know they're in it. Their relationship to discomfort is performance. They push through it, they don't stop to name it, and they experience naming it as weakness. So they keep going, and the collateral damage accumulates, and they're often the last to understand why everyone around them has gone quiet. What a wind needs when stressed. Direct acknowledgement that the pace is unsustainable, delivered without apology. Not, "I'm sorry, but," just the fact. Wind types respect directness. They don't respond well to tiptoeing. They also need someone who won't match their intensity. A calm, firm presence is the only thing that has a chance of slowing them down. Water under stress withdraws and floods simultaneously. Internally, they are drowning. An accumulation of sensory and emotional input that has exceeded their processing capacity. Externally, they may look either unusually quiet, in withdrawal mode, or unusually fragile, in flood mode, sometimes cycling between the two. In withdrawal mode, the water disappears, doesn't respond to messages, cancels plans, goes dark in ways that can feel frightening to the people who love them. In flood mode, they need to process everything out loud, at length, with the person closest to them, which can feel overwhelming for that person, and which the water will later feel guilty about, creating a secondary cycle of distress. What a water needs when stressed: containment, not solutions. The opportunity to say everything once, with genuine reception, without advice or minimizing. And then gentleness. A stressed water is running on no reserves. Anything that requires extra giving from them, even a small social obligation, costs more than you'd expect. A note on stress contagion. The elements don't operate in isolation. When a fire and a wind collide under stress, the combined output can be genuinely destabilizing. When a water and an earth both go quiet at the same time, you can have two people who deeply care for each other sitting in silence that neither of them breaks. Knowing your own element under stress is the beginning of managing your effect on others. The fire who knows they scatter can build in a pause before they pull others into their chaos. The wind who knows they harden can build in the question: am I pushing because it's necessary, or because I don't know how to stop pushing? The earth who knows they shut down can leave a small door open, deliberately, even when every instinct says to close it. The water who knows they flood can develop a triage for their own feelings. What do I need to say right now, and what can wait until I've had a night's sleep? Self-awareness is the only thing that stands between your element and its shadow. Chapter 7. How each element argues. Conflict is the most clarifying thing that can happen in a relationship. How people argue tells you more about them than how they behave when everything is easy. Each element has a characteristic conflict pattern, a default approach to disagreement that is shaped by their underlying nature. Understanding these patterns doesn't mean you can avoid conflict. It means you can stop being surprised by it. Fire in conflict. Quick, emotional, and disorganized. When a fire is upset, you will know immediately. The volume increases, the emotional stakes escalate, the argument goes from zero to existential in less time than it takes you to figure out what you're actually disagreeing about. Fire types feel everything before they think everything. And in conflict, this means you are often managing a torrent of feeling that contains, somewhere inside it, an actual concern that has not yet been clearly articulated. Fire types are not strategic in arguments. They are not building a case. They are erupting, and the eruption is the communication. The challenge is finding the signal inside the noise. What makes it worse? Defending yourself point by point. Fire types in conflict do not want to be debated. They want to be felt. Every logical rebuttal raises the emotional temperature. What actually helps? Sitting in it briefly, saying, "I can hear that something really matters to you here," before you say anything else. The fire needs to feel that you received the feeling before you can address the content. Once they feel received, the volume drops, and you can have a real conversation. How fire types tend to resolve? Quickly. They flare and they release. The argument that felt catastrophic at 10 at night is often over by morning. They don't hold grudges. They don't have the organizational patience for it. What they remember is not the argument, but how it ended. With reconnection, or without it. Earth in conflict. Quiet, patient, and dug in. Earth types don't like conflict. This doesn't mean they avoid it. It means they approach it cautiously, deliberately, and with a clear preference for resolution over expression. An earth who raises something has been sitting on it for a long time. The fact that they're bringing it up is itself a signal that something significant has accumulated. In the moment, earth types appear calm to the point of apparent indifference. They don't raise their voice. They don't catastrophize. They state their position, once, clearly, and then wait. This can infuriate people who want more emotional engagement, who interpret the Earth's calm as dismissal rather than as their natural processing mode. What makes it worse? Taking their calm as permission to escalate. An Earth who is being yelled at has not become more open to your position. They have become a wall. The more emotional pressure you apply, the more closed they become. What actually helps? Giving the earth time to process and respond. Say your piece clearly, then stop talking. Let silence happen. The earth is not finished. They're thinking. Filling the silence because it's uncomfortable will derail the whole thing. How earth types tend to resolve. Slowly, completely, and with follow-through. Once an earth decides the conflict is over, it's over. Not filed away and revisited, actually closed. They are extraordinarily good at releasing once resolution is genuine. They just need genuine resolution, not performance of it. Wind in conflict. Direct, relentless, and difficult to escape. Wind types argue like they do everything else. Full commitment, high expectations, and no patience for what they perceive as deflection, vagueness, or weakness. They have a position. They've thought about it. They're going to make it clear, and they expect you to meet them at the same level of clarity. Arguments with wind types can feel like cross-examination. They ask pointed questions that feel like accusations. They correct your factual errors mid-sentence. They name the dynamic. What you're actually doing right now is changing the subject in ways that are accurate but feel invasive. Wind types argue to win, but winning for them doesn't always mean you agree with them. Sometimes winning means the truth is on the table. Even uncomfortable truth, even truth about themselves. Wind types are capable of admitting they were wrong, but only when they've arrived at that conclusion themselves. Being told you're wrong is a challenge. Discovering you're wrong is a revelation. What makes it worse? Getting small. If you withdraw, placate, or fold without actually agreeing, the wind will either press harder or lose respect for you. Either outcome damages the relationship. What actually helps? Holding your ground while staying non-defensive. Short, clear statements. I see it differently. Here's how. Then stay. The wind respects people who can take the heat without either collapsing or counterattacking. How wind types tend to resolve. Decisively, and then they move on. They do not linger in conflict for its own sake. Once the issue is resolved, or once they've accepted that it won't be resolved today, they file it and move forward. They are often surprised when others are still upset days later. They've already closed the chapter. Water in conflict. Deep, slow, and impossible to rush. Water types do not do quick conflict. They experience disagreement as a complete emotional event. Not just the words exchanged, but the history that led here, the implications for the future, the things that were almost said and weren't, the feeling underneath the feeling. By the time a water is ready to have the real conversation, the other person has often decided the argument is over. Water types are extraordinarily attuned to subtext, which means they often respond to what they think you meant rather than what you said. They can hear contempt in a neutral tone. They can read dismissal into a change of subject. This can make them seem hyperreactive to people who are less attuned, which creates a secondary conflict. Now you're arguing about whether they had the right to feel what they felt. Water types are not manipulative, but their sensitivity means their hurt is genuinely disproportionate to what, from the outside, seemed like a small thing. This disproportion is confusing and sometimes frustrating for everyone involved. What makes it worse? Minimizing. That's not what I meant. Or, you're being too sensitive, does not close the conversation. It opens a deeper one. The water now has to process not just the original hurt, but your dismissal of it. What actually helps? Slowing down and going through it. Not performing concern, but being genuinely present for the full scope of what the water needs to say. This takes patience. It's worth it. A water who has been truly heard will give you the most genuine reconciliation of any element, specific, thoughtful, and lasting. How water types tend to resolve. Deeply, and with residue. Water types forgive completely, but they don't forget. Not because they hold grudges, but because they store everything, and the memory of the hurt is filed alongside the memory of the healing. They learn from conflict in a way no other element quite does. What they ask in return is that the learning goes both ways. Chapter 8. How each element loves. Nothing reveals the elements more clearly than how they love. Because love, in the full, sustained, daily practice sense, is where each element's gifts and cost show up in their most concentrated form. The fire's intensity is doubled. The earth's steadiness becomes the whole climate. The wind's demand for excellence targets you, specifically. The water's absorptive quality means they carry you inside themselves in a way that is profound and, occasionally, too much. How fire loves. The fire falls fast, loves loudly, and makes you feel like the most important person who has ever existed. At least until the next thing catches their attention. Being loved by a fire in the early stages is intoxicating. They are all in. They are texting you at midnight just because they thought of something you'd find funny. They are planning trips and talking about the future with a certainty that makes you believe it. They remember the things you like, the things you hate, the story you told in passing, and they reference it weeks later and you think, they really see me. They do. Fire types are genuinely, completely present in the moments when they're present. The problem is that presence isn't always consistent. The same impulsivity that makes falling in love with a fire feel like jumping off a cliff with a parachute that probably works. Exhilarating and not entirely safe. Makes sustaining a relationship with them a particular kind of work. Fire types need novelty in love the way they need novelty everywhere. A relationship that becomes too settled starts to feel like a trap to them, and their response to feeling trapped is movement. Not necessarily out of the relationship, but away from the parts that feel confining. Loving a fire well requires you to hold two things at once. Their genuine love for you, which is real, and their genuine need for space and novelty, which is also real. The partners who last with fire types are the ones who don't take the spaciousness personally. Who understand that when a fire disappears into their own world for a week, it is not commentary on you. It's just the tide. What fire types offer in long-term love? The relationship never fully settles into routine. They will always come home with something. A story, an idea, a plan, an energy. You will never be bored. You will sometimes want to be bored. You will, very occasionally, succeed. How Earth loves. The Earth loves like they do everything. Thoroughly, consistently, and for the long term. Being loved by an Earth is, at first, quietly different from other kinds of love. It is not explosive. There is no grand gesture in the first week, no declaration that seems too large for the timeline. What there is, instead, is a progressive, unannounced accumulation of small things done right. The remembered preference, the kept promise, the presence at the thing that mattered even though it was inconvenient. By the time you realize you've been thoroughly loved by an Earth, you've been thoroughly loved by an Earth for quite a while. It arrives not as a wave but as a tide. Slow, patient, and covering more ground than you noticed. Earth types love through action more than words. They may not say I love you with the frequency of a fire or with the emotional depth of a water. They will show up at your door when you're sick with soup they made themselves, because of something you mentioned once 2 months ago. What Earth types offer in long-term love? Absolute reliability. When the world is falling apart, your Earth partner is not leaving. They are not renegotiating the terms. They are there, in the same form they were there before, and that constancy, when you really need it, is the most stabilizing force you will ever encounter. How wind loves. Wind types love with the same intensity they bring to everything, which is simultaneously exhilarating and exhausting. In the early stages of a relationship, a wind is a revelation. They are fully present. They are interested in you at depth. Not your surface, your interior. They ask the questions no one else asks. They push you to think harder about yourself and your choices, and their attention, which is always intense, directed at you feels like being lit from within. Wind types also love through challenge. They believe love should make you better. A wind who stops pushing you has, in a real sense, stopped believing in you. Their challenge is a form of love. The difficulty is learning to receive it that way. Because a wind's love challenge can also feel, in lower moments, like relentless critique. Wind types in love are not, as people fear, emotionally unavailable. They are protected. The interior is there. Getting to it requires proving that you can take the heat, that you won't leave when it gets intense, that you're not going to use their vulnerability against them. When a wind lets you in, really in, the experience is one of extraordinary loyalty, passion, and depth. What wind types offer in long-term love? A relationship that sharpens you. If you want to grow, if you want to be pushed, if you want a partner who will tell you the truth even when it's hard, there is no better companion. How water loves. Being loved by a water is the closest thing to being completely known. Water types bring everything to love. Their full attention, their full sensitivity, their full capacity for empathy. They don't half listen. They don't half feel. They are in the relationship the way they are in all things. Fully, absorptively, at significant personal cost. What this looks like in practice. The water knows what you need before you've fully identified it yourself. They remember the anniversary of the difficult thing. They send the message on the day they know will be hard. They hear the thing you meant and respond to that, not just the thing you said. Water types also need a specific and precious thing from love. Safety. Not just safety to be gentle, which everyone needs, but safety to be honest. To say I'm overwhelmed, or I need space, or that hurt, without worrying that the admission will break something. What water types offer in long-term love? A depth of understanding that changes you. The experience of being truly seen by someone who sees everything is one of the most healing things a human being can offer another. Water types offer it naturally, freely, and at real cost to themselves. The least we can do is notice. Chapter 9. How each element works in teams. There is nowhere the elements are more visible or more consequential than in a workplace. The workplace strips away the softening that happens in friendships and family relationships. You cannot choose your team the way you choose your friends. You cannot opt out of the energy dynamics in a meeting the way you can leave a party. You are in the room, with these specific people, trying to produce something together, and the way each person operates is on full display. Understanding the elements at work won't make difficult colleagues easy, but it will make them legible. And legible is enormously better than inexplicable. Fire at work. At their best. The person who transforms the energy of any meeting they enter. The idea generator. The one who connects the dots between things no one else thought to connect. The colleague who makes people feel excited about a project that, on paper, is not exciting. At their worst, the person who has 17 unfinished projects and is starting an 18th. Who missed the deadline because something more interesting happened. Who disrupts a meeting not because they're wrong, but because they can't not say the thing they just thought of. Working with a fire. Match their early energy, then become the structure they don't provide themselves. The fire and earth pair is one of the most productive possible combinations. The fire generates, the earth implements. What to avoid? Expecting follow-through at the same level as the initial commitment. What to use? Their gift for morale and momentum, especially at inflection points. Earth at work. At their best. The institutional memory. The one who knows how things actually work, not just how they're supposed to work. The person who's been doing their job with quiet excellence for years and whose absence, when it happens, reveals exactly how much they were holding together. At their worst, the blocker. The person who has heard 10 proposals for change and opposed every one of them. Not out of malice, but out of a deep skepticism that anything new will work as well as what already works. Working with an earth. Don't try to convert them in the meeting. Change proposals need runway time with an earth. A private conversation, in advance, that lets them process without the pressure of performing a reaction in front of others. What to use? Their knowledge of what has been tried before and why it didn't work. Wind at work. At their best, the person who actually makes things happen. Not just the person who says they will, but the person who does. Who holds themselves and others to a standard that feels unreasonable until you see the results. At their worst, The person who makes the team afraid. Whose feedback sessions people dread. Whose name on a meeting invite creates a low-grade anxiety. Who loses talented people not to other companies, but to the exhaustion of being held to an impossible standard. Working with the wind. Be direct and be prepared. If you have concerns, articulate them clearly and bring evidence. Wind types respect professional courage. What to avoid? Fragility, vagueness, or the habit of telling them what they want to hear. Water at work. At their best. The person who sees the dynamics everyone else is missing. The colleague who knows, before anyone else does, that the team is burning out. The manager who has individual conversations that actually change things. At their worst. Overwhelmed, paralyzed, or invisible. The workplace is not designed for water types. An unprotected water in a demanding environment will eventually go quiet, produce less, and eventually leave. Not with a dramatic exit, but with a gradual disappearance. Working with the water. Give them protected time and space for deep work. Don't mistake their quietness for disengagement. Invite their observations explicitly. Ask what they're noticing about how a project is going, because they won't volunteer it unprompted, but their read on the room is almost always more accurate than the room itself. The ideal team. It would be convenient if the ideal team were simply one of each element. And there is something to this. A founding team with a fire's vision, an earth's execution, a wind's drive, and a water's sensitivity is genuinely well-balanced. But the ideal team is really about awareness, not composition. The most dangerous team is one where no one has any idea what element they are. Where wind thinks everyone else is just slow, fire thinks everyone is unreliable, earth thinks everyone is reckless, and water thinks everyone is cruel. Without a shared language for what's happening, the energy dynamics become invisible, and invisible dynamics become toxic. This book has given you a language. Use it. Part 4. What you can do about it. Chapter 10. What element are you to other people? You've been listening to this book from the outside. You've been nodding at fire and thinking about your friend. You've been hearing about wind and thinking about your boss. You've been listening to water and thinking about your partner. And there's probably been one chapter, somewhere in this book, where you found yourself paying closer attention. Not because it was less interesting, but because you were managing a vague, growing awareness that you were not hearing about someone else at all. That chapter was the one about your element. This chapter is the hardest one. Not because the concepts are complicated, but because it requires turning the lens around. The question worth asking. The question is not, what is my element? That question is interesting, but relatively comfortable. Identifying your element in a framework like this tends to produce a mix of recognition and mild self-congratulation. Yes, I see myself in this, and how insightful of me to recognize it. The harder question is, how does my element land on the people around me? Not how you intend it. Not how you experience it from the inside. How it actually lands. What it costs the people who love you, and work with you, and share space with you. What you have been given unlimited permission to do, because it's just how you are, that has been, for years, a real expense for the people around you who have never said so. If you are fire, the people who love you have learned to hold your promises lightly. They have a version of fire excited about this, and a version of fire will follow through on this, and they have learned, gently and without saying so, that these are not always the same list. What your people need you to know. Your attention is a gift. Its inconsistency is a cost. Both things are true, and only you can decide what to do with that. The specific thing to work on. Follow through on the smallest promises. Not the grand gestures. Those you do naturally. The small thing you said you'd do on Tuesday. The check-in you promised after the hard week. Consistency on the mundane commitments builds the trust that makes your intensity a gift rather than an intermittent weather event. If you are Earth, the people who love you have stopped bringing you certain things. Not because they stopped caring about your opinion, but because they've learned, slowly and mostly wordlessly, that some of their changes and growth and enthusiasms will not be met with the reception they hope for. They've learned to edit before they share. What your people need you to know. Your consistency is more precious than you understand. Your resistance to change costs more than you realize. Both are true. The specific thing to work on. Curiosity. When someone presents you with something new, an idea, a change, a version of themselves you haven't seen before, try one genuine question before the concern that is already forming. If you are wind, the people who work with you are afraid to make mistakes in front of you. Some of them are afraid in a productive way, the kind of fear that keeps standards high and makes people bring their best work. But some of them are afraid in the other way, the kind that makes people hide problems rather than surface them. What your people need you to know. Your belief in high standards is a gift. Your delivery of them is not always. The content of what you say is often right. The way you say it sometimes makes people unable to hear it. The specific thing to work on. The pause before the critique. Not to suppress it. Your instinct is usually accurate, and the world needs it. But one breath of genuine acknowledgement first. What's working? What the effort cost? This is not softness. It is the minimum investment required for your feedback to land the way you intend it. If you are water, the people who love you worry about you more than they say. They see you take on their distress. They watch you absorb the room. They watch you stay when you should leave, give when you're already empty, say yes when every part of you is saying no. What your people need you to know. Your depth is a gift beyond measure. Your difficulty saying no is costing you, and the cost is visible to the people who love you, even when you hide it. The specific thing to work on. A clear, practiced phrase for when you've hit your limit. Not a lengthy explanation, not an apology, not a rain check with 5 caveats. Just, I've hit my limit today. I'll be back. Say it before you disappear. Chapter 11. How to protect your energy. Here is a truth that this book has been circling. You cannot choose who exhausts you. You can only choose what you do about it. Some of the most draining people in your life are people you love. Some of them are people you cannot remove. A parent, a boss, a colleague you share a project with, a neighbor who has your phone number. The framework in this book is not meant to give you permission to exit every difficult relationship. It's meant to give you the tools to stay in the ones that matter without sacrificing yourself in the process. Protecting your energy is not about building walls. It's about building doors with handles on both sides, so that you get to choose when to open them. Know your own element first. Everything in this chapter is more effective if you know your element. Because protecting your energy from a wind is different if you are an earth than if you are a water. Managing a fire is different depending on whether you're energized or drained by high-energy people. More importantly, your own element determines where your energy actually goes. Water needs to know it absorbs before it can stop absorbing. Earth needs to know it carries the relationship before it can share the load. Wind needs to know it costs something before it can manage the cost. Fire needs to know it scatters before it can consolidate. Self-knowledge is not a luxury. It's the prerequisite for everything else. The energy audit. Once a month, or more often, if you're in a particularly demanding season, do a simple inventory of the people who take up space in your life and what they cost you. Not a harsh judgment. Not a list of who is bad. Just a clear-eyed accounting. After time with this person, do I feel more or less resourced? Is the exchange reciprocal over time? Is there something in this relationship I keep hoping will change that has not changed in years? The point of the audit is not to make decisions. It's to see clearly. The audit replaces fog with information. What you do with the information is a separate question. Limits are not rejections. A limit is a piece of information about yourself. It says, this is what I have, and this is where it runs out. It is not a judgment about the other person. It is not a withdrawal of care. It is the honest expression of what you can give without depleting something you need. Fire types need to get concrete. I can do 2 hours is a limit. I need some downtime this week is not, it will get talked past. Earth types need to say it earlier. Earth types tend to absorb past their limits without naming them, and then express the depletion indirectly. Through withdrawal, through reduced warmth. Wind types need to say it plainly. No softening. No apology. I'm not available for this conversation at the level it needs right now. Can we find a better time? Water types need to practice saying it at all. For many water types, the phrase, "that's too much for me right now," is one they have rehearsed and never deployed. Rehearsing is not enough. Recovery as practice. Fire types recover through variety and novelty that doesn't involve other people's demands. Something new and low stakes and entirely their own. Earth types recover through routine. The return to the familiar structure. The same walk, the same morning, the same ritual that signals to the nervous system that the environment is stable, is the Earth's clearest path back. Wind types recover through completion. They don't rest well when things are unfinished. The most effective recovery strategy for a wind is identifying the one thing that would most reduce the background pressure, completing it, and then, deliberately, consciously, stopping. Permission to stop is the thing wind types often need, but rarely give themselves. Water types recover through solitude and low stimulation. Not loneliness. Water types don't want to be abandoned. But unstructured, quiet time without input. No one needing anything, no emotional content to process, just space. The relationship's worth the cost. Some relationships are net negative and should be ended. This book doesn't pretend otherwise. But many relationships that feel draining are actually net positive over a longer timescale. They cost something and they give something, and the giving is real even when it's not immediately visible. The parent who is difficult is also the one who gave you something irreplaceable. The colleague who is demanding is also the one who makes you better. The elemental framework does not tell you which relationships to keep and which to leave. It tells you what you're dealing with, so that you can make that decision with clarity rather than confusion. What you are not allowed to do, if you want to stay well, is stay in a relationship without knowing what it costs you and why you're paying it. Chapter 12. How to talk so each element listens. Understanding the elements is the beginning. The practical end of that understanding is knowing how to communicate with each one. This chapter is a practical guide. It is not about manipulation, it's about translation. Every element has a native language, and speaking in someone's native language is not manipulation any more than learning French before visiting France is manipulation. It's respect. It's meeting someone where they are instead of where you wish they were. Talking to fire. Lead with enthusiasm. Fire types open when they feel your energy match theirs. Not your anxiety, not your caution, but your genuine interest in what you're about to say. Even if the topic is a difficult one, find the thing that is genuinely interesting to you about it and lead with that. Be vivid. Fire types are bored by abstraction and energized by specificity. Not, "I've been feeling disconnected. I realized I haven't talked to you properly in 3 weeks and I miss you." Keep it short. Fire types listen in bursts. The window is real and it is not infinite. Make your main point, make it alive, and stop. Don't chase them if they disengage. A brief reset. "Let's come back to this when you have space for it," is more effective than pressing forward. Talking to Earth. Give context. Earth types need to understand why before they can properly receive what. Don't assume shared context. Lay it out. Be patient with their processing. Earth types don't give immediate responses to anything significant. If you ask an Earth for their thoughts and they say, "I'll think about it," they mean it. Don't interpret silence as opposition. Check back in a few days. Make the change concrete and contained. The smaller the change you're proposing, the lower the resistance. Once the small change is in place, the next small change is easier. Acknowledge what's working. Before you propose anything different, name what you appreciate about what already is. Earth types have often been quietly tending something for a long time. Recognizing it before you suggest changing it makes the suggestion feel like iteration, not criticism. Talking to wind. Be direct and be prepared. The wind doesn't want your preamble. State your point, state your evidence, state what you need. Then stop. Don't apologize for your position. Wind types read excessive apology as insecurity. If you're wrong about something, own it cleanly. If you're right, hold it. Ask questions instead of making challenges. Walk me through how you got there is more likely to create dialogue than, I don't think that's right. Time it right. Wind types are more accessible when they're not under external pressure. The conversation you have in 5 minutes of real receptivity is worth more than an hour in the wrong conditions. Talking to water. Slow down. Water types process at a different pace, and a rushed conversation produces a shallow result. If you need something real, build in the time for it. Be honest about your emotional state. Water types already know something is going on. Pretending otherwise doesn't protect them. It just adds another layer of processing. Invite their read. Water types carry observations they won't share unless asked. The direct question, "What are you noticing that I might not be seeing?" is one of the most useful things you can ask a water. Close the loop. Water types are haunted by unfinished conversations. A brief return to a conversation that mattered, even weeks later, is a profound relief. On combinations. Real conversations involve elements in combination, and the combinations create their own dynamics. Fire and wind. Fast, productive, combustible. The fire generates, the wind evaluates, and the friction between them produces either something excellent or a wildfire. These conversations need a referee or a shared commitment to ground rules. Earth and water. Slow, deep, and mutually cautious. Both elements take time to open. The conversations that eventually happen between a healthy earth and healthy water are among the most enduring. But they require patience from both parties to get there. Wind and water. The most difficult pairing. The wind's directness and the water's sensitivity are in direct tension. Wind types in relationship with water types need to move slower than feels natural. Water types in relationship with wind types need to distinguish between what was intended and what landed. Fire and water. Electric and depleting in equal measure. The fire fills the space. The water absorbs it. The risk is that the water disappears inside the fire's orbit and stops contributing their own substance. The best fire-water conversations are ones where the fire has learned to pause. Earth and wind. The most functional pairing professionally, the most frustrating personally. These pairs tend to either work beautifully over a long time, each having learned the other's language, or not at all. Part 5. Going deeper. Chapter 13. Find your element. A guided reflection. You've been listening to this book with people in mind. Now it's time to turn it on yourself. What follows is not a clinical personality test. It won't give you a diagnosis or a percentile score. What it will do is surface your dominant patterns. The way you tend to move through the world, communicate, process emotion, and affect the people around you, and point you toward the element that fits most closely. A few things before we begin. Answer as you actually are, not as you'd like to be. The most useful result is an honest one. Answer for your baseline, not your best day. Think about how you behave when you're tired, pressured, or mildly overwhelmed. That's where your element lives. You may find yourself split between two elements. This is normal. Most people have a dominant element and a secondary one. There are no good or bad results. Every element has gifts. Every element has costs. The goal is clarity, not flattery. I'll ask 15 questions. For each one, notice which answer resonates most honestly. You might want to pause this recording and make a note, or simply keep a mental tally as we go. Part 1. How you move through the world. Question 1. At a party where you know only a few people, you tend to work the room. You've met 6 new people before the first hour is up. B. Find 1 or 2 people you know well and stay close to them all night. C. Arrive with an agenda. There are specific people you wanted to connect with. D. Spend the first 30 minutes quietly reading the room before deciding how to engage. Question 2. A friend cancels plans at the last minute. Your first reaction is A. Mild disappointment, quickly replaced by the opportunity to do something else entirely. B. Genuine frustration. You'd arranged your day around this. C. Irritation. Your time was committed and this is inconsiderate. D. Relief, if you're honest, mixed with concern about whether they're okay. Question 3. When you have a big decision to make, you make it quickly based on what excites you most, then adjust as you go. B. Take your time, research thoroughly, and consult people whose judgment you trust. C. Gather the relevant data, weigh the options systematically, decide, and move. D. Sit with it, sometimes for a long time, until the right answer becomes clear from the inside. Question 4. Your relationship to plans is best described as plans are suggestions. The best things happen when you're flexible. B. Plans are commitments. If you said you'd do something, you'll do it. C. Plans are targets. You make them, optimize them, and hold people to them. D. Plans depend on how you're feeling. You need to preserve the right to change. Question 5. In a group conversation, you tend to drive the energy. You notice when it lags and do something about it. B. Contribute steadily, but don't feel the need to lead or dominate. C. Cut to what matters. You have little patience for conversations going in circles. D. Listen more than you speak, and when you speak, people sometimes seem surprised by how much you noticed. Part 2. How you handle difficulty. Question 6. When you're stressed, the people closest to you would say you become chaotic and hard to keep up with. Lots of energy, not all of it useful. B. Quieter and more closed off than usual. C. Harder to be around. More critical, less patient, higher standards. D. Fragile and easily overwhelmed. Small things land harder than they should. Question 7. When someone upsets you, you say so immediately, sometimes before you've fully processed what happened. B. Go quiet for a while and bring it up later, carefully when you've decided it needs addressing. C. Address it directly and specifically. You prefer to get things resolved. D. Carry it longer than you probably should, turning it over before you can articulate it. Question 8. Your relationship with criticism is you hear it, react emotionally, and then usually move on fairly quickly. B. You take it seriously, sometimes too seriously, keeping it longer than necessary. C. You want it to be earned and specific. Vague criticism frustrates you more than negative criticism. D. It lands hard, even when it's delivered gently. You need time to separate the feedback from the feeling. Question 9. When a relationship in your life is struggling, your instinct is to talk about it. Loudly, urgently, right now if possible. B. Wait and see if it resolves itself. You don't like to force conversations before they're ready. C. Identify what's wrong, state it plainly, and work toward a solution. D. Feel it deeply for a while before you can find the words. Question 10. Your biggest fear in close relationships is being abandoned or ignored. B. Being forced to change or lose the stability you've built. C. Being seen as inadequate or letting the standard slip. D. Being too much for people, overwhelming them, or being dismissed for feeling too deeply. Part 3. How you give and receive energy. Question 11. After a long social event, you feel buzzing. You could keep going, maybe find somewhere else to be. B. Comfortable and satisfied if it was with people you know well. Drained if it wasn't. C. Ready to decompress from the performance of sociality. You are on, and now you want to be off. D. Saturated. You picked up a lot, and you need time alone to process it all. Question 12. The compliment that means the most to you is, you made this so much fun. I'm always better after seeing you. B, I know I can always count on you. You're the most reliable person in my life. C, the work you did on this was exceptional. You raised the whole standard. D, you really understood what I was going through. I've never felt so heard. Question 13. The criticism that stings most is, you're unreliable. You say you'll do things and then you don't. B, you're stuck. You resist everything new and it holds everyone back. C, you're too hard on people. Not everyone can meet your standards. D, you're too sensitive. You take everything personally. Question 14. In your closest friendships, you tend to be the one who initiates, plans, and brings the energy. B, the one who shows up consistently and can be counted on without being asked. C, the one who challenges people to be their best and doesn't let things slide. D, the one who people come to when something is really wrong because you'll actually understand. Question 15. When I walk into a room, I want people to feel more alive than they did before I arrived. B, safe and settled. Like everything is going to be okay. C, like they'd better bring their best. And that it's worth it. D, understood. Seen. Like the emotional temperature of the room has been read and met. Reading your results. Count how many times you chose each letter. Mostly A answers. Your dominant element is fire. Mostly B answers. Your dominant element is earth. Mostly C answers. Your dominant element is wind. Mostly D answers. Your dominant element is water. If your answers are split relatively evenly between two letters, your dominant element is probably whichever showed up in questions 6, 7, and 8, the stress and difficulty section. That's where the element lives most clearly. If you answered the same letter for questions 10 and 13, the fear and the criticism that land hardest, that's a strong signal. Those two questions are the most reliable indicators of your element. A note on mixed results. Some people hear the 4 elements and feel clearly, immediately identified with one. Others feel like 2 or even 3 descriptions are accurate. Both experiences are valid. The elements are not rigid boxes. They are tendencies, directions of pull. What matters most is not which letter you scored highest. It's which chapter made you feel the most seen, and which one made you slightly uncomfortable about what it said about you. The discomfort is the signal. Follow it. Chapter 14. Elements in Love, the Combination Guide. The chapter on how each element loves covered the 4 in isolation. What each one brings to a relationship, what they need, what they cost. This chapter goes deeper into the pairings. What actually happens when specific elements come together in romantic partnership, over time, under pressure? These are not predictions of success or failure. Every pairing can work. Every pairing can fail. What differs is the specific terrain, the predictable friction points, the underappreciated strengths, the things each pair needs to actively build that don't come naturally to them. Find your pairing. Listen to it generously. Fire and fire. 2 fires together is the relationship that looks the most exciting from the outside and requires the most work from the inside. Early stages. Incandescent. They match each other's energy in a way that feels unprecedented. Finally, someone who moves at the same pace. The relationship generates enormous heat in its opening phases, spontaneous plans, intense conversations, a mutual certainty that this is something different. The friction emerges when both people need to be the sun. Without negotiation, they compete for airtime rather than building together. And the warmth that attracted them curdles into a kind of low-grade rivalry. What makes it work? A shared commitment to novelty that includes the relationship itself. Fire-fire pairs who last are the ones who keep finding new things to do together. The moment the relationship becomes too settled, both fires start looking for the heat elsewhere. What it needs. Someone has to hold the structure. Explicitly decide who it is, rotate it, hire help, but solve it. Fire and earth. One of the most common pairings, and also one of the most instructive, because it puts the two most oppositional elements in intimate proximity. Fire brings the spark. Earth provides the ground. Early on, this feels perfectly complementary. The fire is energized by the earth's reliability, and the earth is drawn out of their careful steadiness by the fire's warmth and motion. The fire feels held. The earth feels alive. The friction is around pace and reliability. Fire moves faster than earth is comfortable with. Earth moves slower than fire wants. Over time, the fire can start to feel constrained. The earth can start to feel anxious, as though they can never fully trust that the fire will be where they said they'd be. What makes it work? The fire learning that reliability is a form of love, not a limitation. The earth learning that flexibility is a form of trust, not recklessness. The fire-earth pair at its best is a genuinely powerful unit. Visionary and grounded, exciting and stable. Fire and wind. Fast, productive, combustible, and deeply stimulating. Right up until it isn't. The friction is around direction and credit. What fire experiences as creative momentum, wind can experience as undisciplined noise. What wind experiences as necessary quality control, fire can experience as relentless dampening. There is also an ego dimension. Both fire and wind types carry a strong sense of self. Both like to be right. In the best moments, this creates exhilarating intellectual sparring. In the worst moments, two people trying to win the same argument. What makes it work? The wind learning to celebrate the fire's ideas before critiquing them. The fire learning that wind's high standards are a form of investment, not an attack. This pairing rarely produces a dull relationship. The question is whether it produces a peaceful one. Fire and water. The most emotionally intense pairing, and one of the most potentially transformative. The fire is captivated by the water's depth. The water is drawn to the fire's brightness. The warmth, the motion, the sense of being genuinely seen and celebrated in a way that the water, who usually does the seeing, rarely experiences. The friction arrives around volume and pace. The water starts to feel flooded. They go quiet. The fire, sensing the withdrawal, tends to turn up rather than turn down. More presence, more enthusiasm, more trying to reach the water through the very mechanism that overwhelmed them. What makes it work? The fire learning to turn down without turning away. The water learning to say, "I'm at capacity," before they go dark. This pairing requires more explicit communication than almost any other, but the emotional rewards, when it works, are extraordinary. Earth and earth. Statistically speaking, one of the most stable pairings. It is also, if both people are not careful, one of the most quietly suffocating. The stability is real. Two earth types have similar values around reliability, commitment, and the importance of showing up. They build things together that have genuine solidity. The challenge is growth. The way things are done becomes the way things are always done. What makes it work? A deliberate, periodic disruption of routine. Not because routine is bad, but because intentional novelty keeps the relationship from calcifying. Earth-earth couples who last well often have a standing practice. A trip they take annually, a conversation they have deliberately. Earth and wind. The most productive professional pairing, and one of the most challenging personal ones. In a work context, these two elements complement each other almost perfectly. Wind pushes forward. Earth holds the ground. In a romantic partnership, the same qualities that make them professionally effective create personal friction. The deepest tension is around value. Earth types value loyalty, consistency, and the quiet accumulation of a shared life. Wind types value growth, excellence, and forward motion. What makes it work? The wind learning that steady and spectacular are not opposites. The earth learning that the wind's push is not a criticism of who they are. Earth and water. One of the gentlest pairings, and one of the most quietly nourishing. Earth and water share a preference for depth over breadth. The water feels safe with earth in a way they rarely feel with other elements. The earth finds in the water a depth of understanding that most people don't offer. The challenge is inertia. Important things stay unspoken because neither person wants to disturb the peace. What makes it work? A shared commitment to occasional honest disruption. Earth-water pairs are often better at these conversations than they expect once they start. Wind and wind. Extraordinary. Demanding. Not for everyone. The best version. Two people who have each found, at last, someone who can take the heat. Two winds who have found this in each other are often deeply, almost fiercely loyal. The hardest version. Two people who can't stop competing. The warmth that makes a relationship livable can get crowded out by the relentless quality control function both people are running simultaneously. What makes it work? A deliberate, repeated, courageous choice to be soft with each other. Not weak. Wind types are not interested in weakness, but genuinely soft. To put the armor down in the specific space of the relationship, even when every instinct says to keep it on. Wind and water. The most challenging pairing in the system, and, when it works, one of the most transformative. Wind and water are, in many respects, opposites. Wind externalizes, water internalizes. Wind moves fast. Water moves slow. And yet they are drawn to each other, repeatedly, because each offers what the other most deeply needs. The friction is intense and patterned. The wind says something direct. The water absorbs it as harder than it was intended. The water goes quiet to process. The wind interprets the silence as passive aggression and presses harder. The cycle repeats, and without intervention, it compounds. What makes it work? More patience from wind than they have ever extended to anyone else. More directness from water than they believe they're capable of. The couples who make this work often describe it as the most meaningful relationship of their lives, precisely because they had to become more of themselves to stay in it. Water and water. The deepest pairing. The most emotionally rich. The one most likely to drown both people if they're not careful. Two water types together create a relationship of extraordinary emotional intimacy. They understand each other without explanation. They feel each other's states before they're named. In the early stages, this can feel like finally coming home. The challenge is boundaries, or rather the lack of them. Water-water couples can also fall into the compassion loop. Both people are so attuned to the other's needs that both spend significant energy managing the other's experience, often at the expense of their own. What makes it work? The deliberate cultivation of separate lives. Not distance. Water types need closeness, but distinct individual practices, friendships, and spaces that belong to each person alone. The water-water couple needs clear channels for each person's independent emotional processing, so that the relationship isn't the only container for everything both people feel. Chapter 15. Your child's element. Everything in this book applies to children, earlier and more visibly than it does to adults. Children haven't yet learned to moderate their element. They haven't received decades of social feedback telling them to turn it down, smooth it out, perform a more acceptable version. A fire child is full fire, most of the time. A water child is absorbing everything in the room with no filter and no buffer. This is useful information for parents, because one of the most common sources of parental distress, the sense that you don't quite understand your child, that you keep doing things that don't work, that you and your child are somehow speaking different languages, is often explained, at least in part, by elemental difference. How to read your child's element. The easiest place to look is stress and transition. How does your child respond when their routine is disrupted? When something doesn't go their way, when they're tired or overwhelmed? A fire child under stress gets loud, escalates, may cry dramatically, rage briefly, and then recover faster than anyone expected. Needs movement. Responds to being matched in energy first, then gently redirected. An earth child under stress goes rigid, may refuse to move, speak, or transition. The meltdown, when it comes, is not explosive but total. Needs advance warning of change, familiar objects and routines maintained as much as possible, and time. Not logic, not urgency, just time. A wind child under stress becomes controlling, may attempt to take over, dominate peers, demand to be the one who decides. Needs clear expectations, a legitimate arena for their leadership energy, and adults who hold the line calmly without backing down. A water child under stress becomes invisible, withdraws, quiets, may seem fine when they're not, which is the most dangerous pattern of all because it's easy to miss. Needs explicit check-ins, a private moment to say the real thing, and the assurance that they will not be overwhelmed by what they share. The fire child. Fire children are the ones who are impossible to ignore. They are loud and physical and seemingly without an off switch. They make friends immediately and intensely. They are exhausting and magnetic in equal measure. What fire children need most from parents? Consistent warmth without consistent availability. Fire children need to know that the love is there, steady, unconditional. But they do not need a parent who is always on and always engaged. The specific parenting trap with fire children. Matching their energy when they escalate. A parent who gets louder in response to a loud fire child has just had a competition, not a conversation. The fire child needs the adult to be the regulation they can't yet provide themselves. Warm, quiet, and firm. The earth child. Earth children are often described, in early childhood, as easy. They are content with routine. They don't demand novelty. They play with the same toys for a long time. They like knowing what comes next. Later, the same qualities can get reframed as stubborn, slow, resistant, or unmotivated. This reframing is both common and unfair. The earth child isn't resistant to growth. They're resistant to change for change's sake. What earth children need most from parents? Predictability and advance notice. The single most effective tool a parent has with an earth child is the transition warning. In 10 minutes, we're leaving. These warnings are not coddling. They are the minimum courtesy required for an earth child's nervous system to adapt without crisis. The wind child. Wind children arrive knowing what they want, and they spend the first several years testing whether the world will give it to them. They are the children who argue with adults. Not defiantly, purposefully. They want to know the reason for the rule. What wind children need most from parents? Legitimate authority and a legitimate arena. The wind child loses respect for adults who can be talked out of their positions, and a wind child who has lost respect for the adults around them is ungovernable. The specific parenting trap with wind children. Taking it personally. The wind child who argues with you is not attacking you. They are being themselves. The parent who learns to respond with steady, non-defensive clarity will eventually find that the wind child is one of the most loyal, capable, and genuinely satisfying people they have ever known. The water child. Water children are the ones adults worry about quietly. They are sensitive. They cry at things other children don't notice. They pick up the emotional weather of the room. They are also extraordinary. They notice everything. They have a natural empathy that most adults spend years trying to cultivate. The child who sat with the kid who was left out, who wrote the note to the teacher who seemed sad. This was a water child. What water children need most from parents? Emotional safety and permission to not absorb everything. The message, "You're too sensitive," is one of the most damaging things a parent can say to a water child, because it tells them that their fundamental mode of being in the world is wrong. They also need explicit permission to not take care of everyone. Water children are natural caretakers, and they will take on the emotional labor of the family system if no one stops them. It is the parent's job to notice it and to say, clearly, that is not yours to carry. Your element as a parent. Your element shapes how you parent. Fire parents bring enormous warmth and enthusiasm to parenting, and they also bring inconsistency. The fire parent is spectacular on good days and scattered on hard ones. Earth parents are steady, reliable, and safe. Their greatest challenge is allowing their child to grow into someone they didn't plan for, to hold the relationship open as the child evolves. Wind parents are the ones who produce capable, high-achieving children who sometimes don't know how to fail. The work is learning to love the child at their ordinary level, not just at their exceptional level. Water parents are extraordinarily attuned and deeply loving. They are also at risk of teaching their children that emotional sensitivity is the primary way of navigating the world, which is not always enough. None of these are indictments. They are the specific work each element has to do to parent well. Knowing your element as a parent doesn't make the work easier. It makes it more visible. And visible work, at least, can be done. Chapter 16. The Field Guides. These guides are designed to be returned to, not just heard once. You might want to replay the guide for a specific element before a difficult conversation, or when you're trying to understand someone's behavior. Each guide covers the essential knowledge for one element: who they are at their best, who they are at their worst, what they need, what drains them, how to reach them, and the one thing most people get wrong about them. Fire, Field Guide. At their best. Magnetic, energizing, visionary. They make things happen and make you feel like it's happening for you too. Nobody ignites a room, a project, or a relationship like a fire in full warmth. At their worst. Chaotic, unreliable, emotionally overwhelming. They start things they don't finish, say things they don't fully mean, and fill every room so completely that no one else can breathe. At their worst, they're a weather event that happens to other people. What they need: to feel seen and celebrated. Genuine engagement with their ideas, not just polite reception. Freedom to change direction without penalty. And, though they rarely ask for it, someone who can stay calm when they can't. What drains them? Rigidity. Slow processes. Being told to wait. Environments where enthusiasm is treated as a liability. People who respond to their energy with correction rather than reception. How to reach them. Lead with energy. Match their warmth before you introduce any friction. Be specific. Make it vivid. Give them a time window and hold it. Follow up. They will not. The one thing most people get wrong. They mistake a fire's enthusiasm for commitment. Fire types mean everything they say in the moment they say it. That moment is real. The follow-through is a separate question that requires separate attention. Earth, Field Guide. At their best. Steady, loyal, reliable. They are the people who hold the world together while everyone else is having the interesting problems. They show up. They remember. They do the thing they said they'd do. In a crisis, there is no one better. At their worst. Immovable, closed, suffocating. They resist change beyond what is reasonable and maintain positions past the point of evidence. At their worst, they use their reliability as leverage, implicitly demanding that others remain as static as they are. What they need. Advance notice. Appreciation for the specific things they quietly sustain. Time to process before they respond. And, though they would never frame it this way, permission to not always be the most reliable person in the room. What drains them? Instability. Last-minute changes. Being pushed to decide or respond before they're ready. Environments where the rules keep shifting and nothing can be relied upon. Chaos, in all its forms. How to reach them. Give them context and lead time. Make the ask specific. Acknowledge what's already working before proposing what should change. Don't push for an immediate response. Plant the seed and give it room to grow. The one thing most people get wrong. They mistake Earth's steadiness for the absence of inner life. Earth types have rich interiors, strong feelings, complex thoughts, deep love, that they simply don't broadcast. The person who seems unmoved is often deeply moved. They just don't show it until they decide to, and they decide slowly. Wind, Field Guide. At their best. Sharp, effective, clarifying. They cut through noise, hold standards, and make the people around them better. They say the things no one else will say and move faster than anyone thought possible. In their presence, mediocrity has nowhere to hide. At their worst, relentless, damaging, isolated, they push past what the situation requires and leave people afraid rather than inspired. At their worst, they are so focused on the standard that they lose sight of the people and find themselves, eventually, very alone in their excellence. What they need: to be met with directness, to be challenged on the substance, not the style, to find the rare person who can take the heat and give it back without collapsing, and, buried deep under the armor, to be known past the performance. What drains them? Mediocrity, vagueness, excessive softening, meetings that could have been emails, people who agree without engaging, environments where the real conversation never happens because everyone is too polite to have it. How to reach them? Be direct and be prepared. No preamble. State your case, bring your evidence, and hold your position. Disagree clearly rather than vaguely. Find the right window, not when they're at full pressure, and recognize that their bluntness is not contempt. It is just how they speak. The one thing most people get wrong: they mistake Win's directness for cruelty, or their standards for impossibility. Win types are not trying to wound people. They're trying to reach a level of honesty that most social environments don't allow. The challenge is not their intention. It is their delivery. Those are two separate problems, and conflating them makes both harder to address. Water, field guide. At their best, deeply perceptive, emotionally intelligent, profoundly present. They understand what others miss. They hold complexity without simplifying it. In their presence, people feel genuinely known, sometimes for the first time. At their worst, overwhelmed, porous, self-erasing, they disappear inside other people's needs and lose track of their own. At their worst, they have absorbed so much that they no longer know what belongs to them, and the only way they know to get relief is to vanish. What they need: emotional safety, explicit permission to say no, solitude that isn't loneliness, and the thing they give so freely to everyone else: to be truly listened to by someone who doesn't need anything back. What drains them? High-noise environments, emotional demands from multiple directions simultaneously, being rushed to process or respond, feeling unseen after spending significant energy seeing everyone else, unfinished conversations that stay active long after the other person has moved on. How to reach them? Slow down and be honest. They already know something is happening. Pretending otherwise costs you credibility. Ask them what they're noticing. Give them space to find the words. Close the loop on conversations that mattered. And when they go quiet, don't chase. Check in once, gently, and wait. The one thing most people get wrong: they mistake water's sensitivity for weakness, or their need for processing time for avoidance. Water types are not fragile. They are highly calibrated. Their response to difficulty is not retreat. It is integration. They are doing the deepest work in the silence that makes other people nervous. The silence is not the problem. Interrupting it before it's done is. A final word. You've reached the end of the book, but the beginning of the actual work. The work is this: going back into your life with different eyes. Looking at the person who leaves you drained and asking what they cost, why they cost it, and whether you can work with that cost rather than just absorbing it. Looking at your own behavior with the honest, slightly uncomfortable clarity that comes from recognizing your element in the chapters you listen to more slowly. The work is also this: extending some compassion to the people who exhaust you. Not unlimited compassion. Not the kind that erases your own needs, but the recognition that the wind who drives you to your limit is also, often, driving themselves to their own limit. That the fire who cancels at the last minute is not trying to hurt you. They are trying not to be trapped. That the earth who won't move is not trying to hold you back. They are trying to hold something together that has always been on the verge of falling apart. That the water who floods you with emotion is not manipulating you. They are simply built to feel everything, and they have nowhere else to put it. People are harder than we'd like and more understandable than we give them credit for. The 4 elements in this book are not a complete map of a human being. No framework is. What they are is a reliable guide to the most common patterns of how people affect each other's energy, and a vocabulary for talking about those patterns honestly, without blame, without judgment, and without the exhausting pretense that if we just cared enough, no one would ever drain anyone. Some people will leave you tired. This will not change. What can change is your understanding of why, and your ability to choose, with clarity, what you do about it. You are allowed to be selective about where you put your energy. You are allowed to decide what you can give and when. You are allowed to set a limit without it meaning you don't care. You are allowed to be a fire who cancels sometimes, an earth who digs in, a wind who pushes too hard, a water who absorbs too much, and to work, over time, toward a version of yourself that does those things less. None of this requires you to become a different element. It only requires you to become a more aware one. Now you know their element. Go rest. Acknowledgements. Every book is the result of the people who made its author. This one is no different. The fire types in my life kept me excited about this project long after the initial rush wore off. The earth types kept me from abandoning it 3 separate times. The wind types made sure the thinking was sharp enough to be worth reading. The water types showed me what it looks like to actually see another person, and then graciously let me write about it. To the readers and listeners who will find themselves in these pages, I hope you find your element first and someone you love second. I hope the gap between those 2 discoveries is instructive. And to everyone who has ever drained you, they were probably doing their best. The same goes for you.